Hello, everyone, and welcome to 15 Questions with an Archaeologist, brought to you by the National Park Service Southeast Archaeological Center. I'm Josh Guerrero, and I'm your host, and this is the show where we're trying to collect as many interviews as we can, where we ask 15 questions with an archaeologist. Each podcast episode will feature one archaeologist answering the same 15 questions. I think it's going to be fun, and we just might learn something. And joining me today, I have Linn Marie Krogsrud, who is part of the Archaeologists Engage network and currently working out of Norway. So, Linn, thanks so much for taking the time for joining me today, and welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, did I pronounce your surname correctly? I mean, you and I, we were kind of talking about that earlier. Did I do okay?
Yeah, you did a great job. It's very difficult for non-Norwegian speakers to pronounce it. Actually, you did a great job.
Okay, I'm glad. I'm very glad. And yes, I've been certainly looking forward to having this conversation with you because, you know, as we mentioned, yes, you are based out of Norway and you study Viking archaeology, among other things. And I will admit, this is an aspect of archaeology I know very little about, so I hope I can keep up with you today.
I'm sure you can.
All right. So to kick things off, our first question, we just try to learn a little bit more about you. As I mentioned, you know, you're part of the Archaeologists Engage network, and you're currently doing other things within Norway. So why don't you tell us where you're working at right now and what it is that you're kind of doing at the moment?
Yes, I live in Oslo, but I work in a small town called Drammen, which is about 30 minutes west of Oslo, in a county called Viken, which is quite a new construct because we had a big reorganization of the counties and municipalities in January. So we have 1.2 million inhabitants. It's the biggest county in Norway now. So I work at a built heritage center, which is part of the county administration. So I work with one more person. He's a carpenter. So we do training courses for carpenters and others working with old houses, and we do a lot of advising for house owners on where they can find the right people to help them to do work on their houses, where they can apply for money, because you have to use different methods and materials for an old house.
Right.
So yes, so that's been great. And interestingly, actually, what I do isn't really considered archaeology in Norway. It's quite interesting when I talk to Emily. She's doing building archaeology, which is exactly what I do. But in Norway we have this divide between archaeology and what we call more building preservation, building conservation, because we have quite a strict heritage law concerning everything that's older than the Reformation. Mm. And then everything after doesn't have the same protection. So it's quite an interesting divide, really. But yes, so a lot of advising and courses, and we're collaborating with the university in the middle of Norway. They have a BA program in traditional building methods, and they have like learning arenas all around the country. So we have 2 students who are with us for 3 or 4 years part-time, and they are learning traditional techniques at the Heritage Center. So they are building a replica of an early 19th century tenant farm, doing everything by hand. They've even gone into the forest, cutting down the trees. We've hauled them out using a horse and carriage, and they're only using axes. So they have to do everything the way they did in the early 19th century. So it's been great. And we also do a lot of outreach for high school students. We invite all carpenter students in the big county to come to us once a year and to sort of have a greater offer to them. We have recently finished an exhibition about carpentry from the early 18th century onwards. So we have this great new exhibition now it's an actual physical education at the training center, and it's also going to be available online for everyone, hopefully also in English. So, and I also do a lot of social media. We have Instagram accounts, Facebook accounts, our own website, and I also do a lot of admin stuff like budgeting, accounting, invoices, so everything to do with running the center, I guess.
Okay. All right. Very
in a nutshell.
Yeah. In a nutshell. Yeah. All right. Well, that makes me very curious to ask you this next question then. And that is, if money were no object whatsoever, what type of archaeology would you do? Do you think you would can continue doing these more like traditional building methods as you are now, or might you look into pursuing something different?
It's a very good question. I love working with the built heritage, and since I'm also very interested in environmental issues, it makes sense, because actually preserving the building heritage is an important contribution to reaching our climate goals.
Absolutely.
And not tearing things down. But I must say, I think I would probably work with Viking Age archaeology in England or Ireland if money was no issue. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So I might go back to sort of the pure archaeology in some time in the future, because I always plan on going back to Ireland after I studied there. But then recession hit in 2008, so I had to make other plans.
Mm-hmm.
Also, I remember when I was doing my bachelor's degree, I always wanted to study the early hominids in East Africa. But then I realized that was it's an amazing area of research, but it's very difficult to get into and difficult working conditions. And that was the primary dream.
Yeah, I imagine that would be pretty difficult to get in. But of course, then again, Vikings is very fascinating in its own right too. When I studied in England, I was exposed a little bit to Vikings, but it kind of seemed like Romans tend to pop up a little bit more. But we did get some exposure to Vikings. I lived in York, which I guess, which at one point was called Jorvik, from the Vikings. And so definitely a little bit of a correlation there. So yeah, that's pretty amazing. So you touched on a little bit about that. You studied in Ireland. So, and that's actually what my next question is about, is your education. So where did you receive your education, and what led you to study at that location? Or maybe it was even a couple of locations that you had studied at.
Yeah, I did my BA in archaeology at the University of Oslo, and Oslo is my hometown in Norway. I don't think it really occurred to me to study abroad at that stage. I wasn't that adventurous when I was 18, 19 years old. So I think it was more than a big enough step just to go to college, actually. So, but after 2 years, I applied for the Erasmus exchange program, which is the European exchange program. So I went to UCD in Dublin in, let me think, spring of 2006. That was the last year of my BA degree, and that was fantastic. And that's where I really got interested into the Viking Age and the meeting of cultures between the Irish population and the Viking or the Norse population. So after that, I went straight into do the master's program at the University of Oslo, but I chose to write my thesis on cultural exchange in Viking Age Ireland, looking at silver artifacts and trade networks and cultural identity. But I took one term off to work in Ireland on an excavation.
Okay. All right. So a little bit in Norway, a little bit in Ireland. So kind of getting the best of both worlds, I suppose. Definitely. So just to kind of dial things in a little bit, could you tell us about some of the most interesting sites that you got to work on? Of course, you're mentioning that you're working with a lot of buildings in and around like the county that you're working in with these traditional building methods. So maybe it might be some of those. Maybe it might be some of the sites in Ireland. What are some sites that stick out in your mind?
Well, for my current job, I have the pleasure of visiting these amazing medieval wooden buildings. The county that I work in has, I think, it's the number 2 or 3 in the country in terms of the number of medieval wooden buildings. And we have the stave churches. I don't know if you've heard about them.
A little bit, but not enough to really know very much about them. So,
that makes sense. That's very understandable. So, and we have all these amazing, we call them stabbur. They are old, they were used for storage. So mainly food, because they are constructed so that mice and rodents can't get in. So we have these amazing old farms up and down the valleys with I've yet to get to visit, but it's on my bucket list. The oldest inhabited house in Norway, which was built in, I think, 1250.
Oh.
Yeah, and still inhabited today. So that's for my current job. But I think from when I was still doing archaeological fieldwork, I got to work on this amazing Slavonic hill fort in Germany on the border to Poland. That was my first fieldwork, actually. That was the first summer after I started my bachelor's degree. So a friend and I worked as volunteers, so we didn't get any money. And it was so cold and windy and rainy, but this amazing site. But it was a rescue excavation, because this was actually because of erosion was falling into the ocean, because that part of the Baltic Sea is very, very windy, and it's hard conditions.
Mm-hmm.
So it was great, but it was really tough, and we didn't really find anything. So it wasn't like we found amazing artifacts, but it was just such a cool location, and it really tested my devotion to study archaeology, because it was really tough. So after surviving 4 weeks of that, working nonstop, I think I knew this was what I wanted to do.
All right, outstanding. And you're absolutely right. Field work, depending on where you are, like different locations will come with its own unique set of environmental challenges. You're mentioning the wind and the cold there in Germany. Here in the southeastern U.S., it's hot, it's humid. We got insects. So
I think so, yeah.
It's a tough gig, no matter where you operate. So for sure. All right, so cool. Those are some sites that you gotten to work on, but I want to dial things in a little bit more now, and I want to ask you about artifacts next. What are some of, I guess, as a lot of people would ask, the coolest artifacts that you've ever recovered?
That was a really good question. I did a lot of thinking about that before the interview, and I think I have to single out two things. The first thing was I've been lucky to work on a few really cool Neolithic sites. In Norway, and Norway doesn't have really good conditions for preserving bones. So right. I worked on the island of Gotland, which is in Sweden, outside of Stockholm, and they have this amazing Middle Neolithic site where they have loads of bones. So we were digging when we just found kilos of bones, and I was just blown away, because in Norway you hardly ever find any bones except when they're burnt, because we have I think it's because we have really acidic soil.
Okay.
I'm no bone expert, but that was really it blew my mind. And I also worked on a Neolithic site near an inland lake in Norway. That was one of my first paid jobs as an archaeologist after I finished my MA. And we found this great flint assemblage, but I didn't see them because we were doing testing. So they stripped off the topsoil, and I cleaned away, so I got to see the underground. And then I went away, and then it rained, and because the sand was really porous, so when I came to work the next morning, I could just see the flint lying all around the trench, and I found fireplaces, and I found this amazing late Neolithic flint scraper. Wow. Which was a unique artifact for that time period, so I could date the site straight away. So I think maybe that's one of my favorites.
All right, outstanding. That is really cool. And yes, going back to what we talked about with certain environments, some, depending on what it is, that could certainly affect like the artifact assemblage that you can find in these different areas too. And clearly, this is a good example of that with whatever, like soil acidity or whatever it might be, then for sure. All right, so what I want to ask you about next, and this is kind of shifting gears a little bit, I want to talk a little bit about mentorship, because I think mentorship is a critical component to archaeology, especially with the development of new up-and-coming archaeologists. So going back to when you first started taking on archaeology, who have been some of your mentors that you've had, and how have they kind of influenced you throughout your career?
I think the person I would like to mention first of all is Dr. Stephen Harrison, who was my lecturer when I did my Erasmus exchange in Dublin. I did, I think, 2 or 3 of his courses when I was there, and he was so inspiring. He has such a passion for Viking Age and early medieval archaeology, and he was so helpful. And he also, since he's working with Viking Age, he also understands and speaks Scandinavian, mostly Danish, but he also understands Norwegian. So he really opened up the world of the Viking Age in Ireland for me. And when I did my MA, he even agreed to be my co-supervisor, even though he wouldn't get any money for it, because the money only goes to the main supervisor at the University of Oslo. But he he wanted to help, so he co-supervised my thesis for free, actually.
Wow.
So yeah, very inspiring, and his passion for the Viking Age is really outstanding. He's working at the University of Glasgow now.
Okay, all right. That sounds like a very solid mentor, which is always kind of nice to have those mentors who are willing to believe in you and give you a chance and to kind of help you see, everything through to the end, because it's a lot of work, to go through the halls of academia in the realm of archaeology. So imagine that was pretty nice to have as you were going about.
Definitely.
All right,
Definitely.
for sure. All right. So shifting gears yet again, the question I have for you is what country handles like cultural resource management and archaeology the best? Because you've had some exposure, in Germany and of course there in Norway, Sweden, and Ireland, as we talked about. But what country out there do you think handles it the best? Like who just seems to get it? What are your thoughts on that?
That's very good questions. I don't really have a clear answer to that. I think one of the good things about Norway, where I have the main bulk of my experience from, is that in Norway, archaeology is still a public sector. Because in most countries, it's up to private companies, and you
Right.
know, hand in hand in tenders. I think it is good for heritage management that archaeology is mainly in the public domain, and I don't think you're saving any money on this being not public. But one of the things that maybe is not so good about Norway is because it's public sector, it's quite sort of a close-knit community. So we haven't in the past been that good at outreach to other people. So archaeology for archaeologists. And I think it's only recently that Norwegian archaeologists are talking more to the public as well. And that's one of the reasons why Archaeologists Engage was started. Because Tina Schenk, who is one of the co-founders, she's a close friend of mine from college, and no one really talked about archaeology to other people except other archaeologists. So I think that's a good one. And I do like the system in England and Ireland because outreach has a much bigger place there, and the public are seen as an important part of the heritage and archaeology. But after working on an excavation in Ireland, and even though it was absolutely fantastic, I met lovely people, I had a great time, but I'm not sure the system with the tenders and all the private companies, I'm not sure the knowledge that you get out of it is as great, I must say.
Okay. Well, hence you and I doing this podcast right now, hopefully maybe increasing our own outreach efforts a little bit and things like that. So, all right. Very, very good. All right. So the next question that I have for you is in regards to volunteers. You've mentioned that you were a volunteer yourself when you were in Germany, but as of right now with what you're doing, in and around Oslo with, again, working with the buildings, the carpenters, do you have any volunteers that work with you in that capacity?
Not really, actually, but since we have courses, and many of the courses are open to everyone, but it's not. So you can say in one way it's open for volunteers, but most of our courses are for carpenters and others who work with the old houses. But we do have we have some sort of low threshold courses for those in how to restore or repair your old window. That's open to everyone. So, and we try to have courses and seminars where we also keep it open to the public so people can come by and see what we're doing. It's a bit difficult now because of COVID, but
sure,
hopefully in the future. So we and that's many of the projects that I work with are long-time repairs. Repairing a house takes a lot of time. Restoring a house takes a lot of time. So you can have open days maybe once a month so people can come in and see what you're doing. So in that capacity, yes, you can say it's open.
Okay. All right. Great. And the next couple questions that I have for you, this is getting to what I say is the core of what it means to be an archaeologist. And the first of those questions is, what is just the best part about being an archaeologist?
Yeah, and for me, it's definitely using the artifacts and the results that you're finding and delving into people's past lives, trying to recreate ancient worlds. I think that's always been my core passion. And also, I must say, I've always been a little geek, always collecting stones and rocks and fossils since I was a child. So that aspect of, looking at the sieve and trying to find little pieces of flint, just, being a nerd again, that's also very, very nice part of it. And
Yeah.
being outdoors, definitely, you get to spend a lot of time outdoors. Great people, great colleagues.
Yeah, absolutely agree, and especially the outdoors part. That's a big thing for me. Is I love getting to work outside and having like adventures every day. So absolutely. All right, but on the flip side, though, what would you say is the worst part about being an archaeologist?
I'd say it's definitely difficult working conditions. There are many temporary jobs, low wages, little job security.
Right.
I think that's one of the reasons or mostly main reason why I quit fieldwork and started doing something else, because it's difficult to get a mortgage. You can't really settle down. You're away most of the year, and you never know what's going to happen next year. So that can be quite tough.
Yeah, and that's certainly the case here in the U.S. as well. Yeah, it's a lot of seasonal jobs, temporary positions, and it can take a good while before something permanent comes along. So yeah, that's definitely pretty prevalent. Seems like no matter where you are in the world. So absolutely. All right. So what I have for you next is, and this is a tribute to The Right Stuff, which is a wonderful novel written by Tom Wolfe. I would like to ask you, who is the greatest archaeologist that you have ever seen?
It's a very good question, actually. Yeah, I don't really have. I'm not sure if there's anyone I can think of. I mean, I've made so many great archaeologists. Like I said, Dr. Stephen Harrison has been a great mentor. But do you mean like in the field where you've been working with them, or in any?
It could be in any capacity that you would like, and I certainly do agree with you. It's hard to just name one because we do get to meet so many brilliant minds. But so I guess in that regard, if you can't think of one, I guess I can give you the option to pass if you need to. But.
I think I'll need to pass.
Okay.
I didn't think about it in advance. Nothing. No one really. Yeah. So I'll take a pass on that one, actually.
Okay, all right, fair enough. Because like we said, there's a lot of amazing archaeologists that we get the pleasure to work with. So it's hard to narrow just one, out of that group. So for sure. All right.
Actually, I can mention one. Actually, now I think about it.
Okay.
I think I mentioned I worked at one of the first excavations I did at the museum in Eastern Norway. I got to work with a Swedish archaeologist called Eva Årberg. And her vast knowledge of the Stone Age in Scandinavia was just amazing. And she was always helping us, giving us loads of information. And she made a cake for us every Friday. And she made archaeology quizzes. So yeah, I think Eva Schaller Årberg is the person I would say it's at least when I've been working in the field. She was vast knowledge of everything Stone Age related in Scandinavia.
All right. Well, there we go. We got one.
Yeah,
so,
we got one. Yeah.
Okay. Very, very good. All right. The next couple questions that I have for you, these are questions that I'm sure all archaeologists have been asked at one point in time. And the first of those is, have you ever found a dinosaur?
No, I haven't. But we did find worked fossils at the Slavonic site I talked about in Germany. They were, I think, early medieval. So that's the closest thing. But remember, the visitors often thought we were digging for oil. So, I mean, oil is at least partly dinosaurs. So I think that's the closest I'll get.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Very good. All right. The next question that goes along these same lines, that is, how do you feel about Indiana Jones?
I love the movies. I think he's a great inspiration for archaeologists, but it's horrendous to watch how he destroys all the heritage he gets in contact with.
Yeah.
Like, I think the inspirational part, but I mean, it's really bad CRM, isn't it?
Yeah. Actually, it's kind of funny. I was watching The Last Crusade yesterday, and I'm like, man, everything's getting blown up and crumbled apart in this film. So, but at the end of the day, they're action adventure films. They're not necessarily archaeology films. But yeah, I know exactly what you mean. For
it
sure.
wouldn't have been very binge worthy, I think, if we showed the true work work day of an archaeologist. It wouldn't be a blockbuster, I'd say.
Yeah, because I mean, as exciting as archaeology can be, it does have its tedious aspects. I don't think anyone would want to watch like a film of me analyzing artifacts in my laboratory for hours on end.
No problem. I remember seeing this amazing meme with alternative Indiana Jones title, like Indiana Jones analyzing 500 shards of pottery and Indiana Jones. I can't remember them all. They were just hilarious.
All right. Very, very good. All right. So I got a couple more questions for you, Lynn, and we're going to kind of start wrapping up on a little bit more of a serious note now. And the first question I have for you wrapping up is, what advice would you give young people, or maybe just even anyone for that matter, who may be seeking to make a career in archaeology?
I'd say be aware that it can be quite difficult to make a career in it, but it's also extremely rewarding, and you'll be able to live out your dreams and meet amazing people who are always also really geeky and interested in the same things as you are. But it can be difficult, especially in your early career.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I think archaeology is one of those professions that, many people will share the highlights, kind of the more, I guess, let's say, quote unquote, romantic side of the profession. But, it does come with its challenges, like you've mentioned, we talked about the tough working conditions of being in the field. We've also talked about sometimes outreach can be difficult, and then funding can be a big issue too, and things like that. So, but yeah, it's very rewarding nonetheless though. So great advice.
Definitely.
Great advice. All right. And the last question, and this is a pretty big one too.
Yeah.
What can the general public do to help protect archaeological sites?
I think use them, visit them, make them yours. Try to learn about heritage, so that way you'll be more careful about heritage sites. If you know what they are and why they are important, it makes it less tempting to try and destroy them. But I think it's also up to us heritage professionals to talk to people about why these sites are interesting and important. So it's a lot up to us as well.
Right. Absolutely agree. So, all right. Well, Lynn, that's it. That's all 15 questions all wrapped up here. But before we close out, I just want to give you a couple more minutes. You got some projects that you're working on like right now. And of course, you're doing things with the Archaeologists Engage community, as we mentioned earlier. So do you want to take a couple minutes just to kind of tell us, what it is you're working on? And is there like ways for anyone out there to follow the projects you're working on via, like, say, social media or elsewhere on the internet space? What do you got going on?
Yes. Like I mentioned, I've been working on a big exhibition at work for carpenters. Sorry, hold on a second. Sorry, just I'm talking in the background there.
It's quite all right.
Yeah. We're working on an online exhibition at the moment about carpentry through the ages, from the early 17th century onwards. And I'm working on expanding it so it can be available in English as well, because at the moment it's only available to Scandinavian speakers. I mean, you can always use Google Translate, but it doesn't really work. But still, I think some of even if you would visit the site in Norwegian, we've made these amazing 3D models of old tools that, everyone can check out. And also with Archaeologists Engage, we have our website, archaeologistsengage.org, where we have 2 article streams where you can read about how archaeologists work on a day-to-day basis. And we're also on Instagram and Twitter and Facebook. So if, like I said, if other archaeologists see this, we'll be happy to have more articles in our article stream. And we're also trying to create more videos now for Archaeologists Engage. We have a new member from Ireland who's he's great on making videos. So we're trying to be more versatile that way. So one of the new projects now, I think it's going to be reviewing movies with archaeology related themes called Archaeologists Engage Review. And it doesn't have to be it's not series documentaries and stuff. It could be stuff like bad movies that features archaeologists and trying to have a humorous spin on it. So yeah.
Yeah, so you'll probably have Indiana Jones, Laura Croft will probably be in there, and a few others. Like so, okay, all right, very good. Well, I'll get the links to that and the show notes for this episode, so the listeners can go and find them there. All right. Well, Linn, I want to thank you very much for taking the time for joining me today. Again, I was really looking forward to having you on this podcast because, again, I love the opportunity to get to interact with colleagues all around the world, hear about what they're doing. So I appreciate you and the work that you're doing over there in Norway. So yeah, thanks so much for being here and sharing all this with myself and the listeners. This has been great.
Thanks for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Absolutely. All right, everyone. That's our show for today. Be sure to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at NPSSEAC. That is at NPSSEAC. And be on the lookout for more episodes of 15 Questions with an Archaeologist dropping at the first of every single month. And please remember that since we work for the government, we spell archaeology without the A and the E, so it's just a little bit different when you read it in the title. Thanks so much for tuning in today. I'm Josh Guerrero, and I'll see you in the next episode.